Maddie. Welcome back to my channel. Sup, nerd? We're on strange footing here. And you know what else is strange footing? The presidential election of 2025. The original version of the script that I will have here off screen is very, very, very mad. It was written during a period of time where I was seeing a lot of videos about how the women who were saying, oh, books aren't political, did not understand what they read. And I am coming from the opposite viewpoint of that fact, of that argument, so to speak, because my channel has been very specifically a place where I talk about how the books that have become very popular, specifically in the romantasy and dark romance genre, are full of not good things and bad writing. And I want to talk about how I find it interesting that there was a hot take spreading amongst the community that it's really weird that the people that are talking about how books aren't political are reading books with political characters, and the main characters of those book series wouldn't have voted for the annoying orange, so to speak. And basically the thesis of this video essay will be that the protagonists of these books are far less liberal than you expect them to be. Now, what I will try to do is not go off on a blaming tangent here. I'm not going to blast people for liking these books, but I am going to point out specific things about the characters in these books where I think there could very well be a causation for how we got to where we are today. Not obviously the entire reasoning, but I just feel like I have to refute the claim that the characters that these people are idolizing wouldn't have voted to support fascism. And to be clear, most of these characters are not fascists, but I do think that they are less liberal leaning than people are giving them credit for. So with that very elongated intro, let's talk about some of the most famous characters in today's fiction world, and how I personally think they are not very liberal. Let's start with Feyre from the ACOTAR series. If you're a friend of the channel, if you've been here a minute, you know I don't like Feyre. I have never liked Feyre. Well, okay, hold up. I did enjoy her in the very first book because the very first book got me back into reading YA, which always feels like a fucking hilarious thing to say to people because most people don't realize that that book series started in YA. But I don't think Feyre is the pinnacle of progressive politics that people are giving her all of this credit for at all. She was born rich, became impoverished, was illiterate for most of her young adult life, and then she died and became a god with superpowers. All mostly to do with a man who drugged her the first time he encountered her. Do I think Feyre's story, especially in the first book, is about a lot of struggles for someone very young? Yes. Yes, I do. But I also think that Feyre is one of the most entitled main characters to read from. She's worse than I would say Bella in the Twilight series. I do want to point out that her being illiterate has nothing to do with her politics, but her mate, in an animalistic sense, protected his people with a magical wall during a point of crisis, and she acclimates really, really quickly to once again being in control of a lot of money and wealth and power. And she also has servants who are the only dark-skinned women, I think, in the entire series, and I just don't feel like we talk about that enough. She also doesn't do pretty much anything to support her ex-fiance's, people once she gets engaged to the other guy, or at least I don't remember quite a lot of her trying to help the Spring Court after she joins the Night Court. Mostly she just spends a lot of time thinking about how she can bully said ex-fiance, and how she also uses her mate to do so. Don't get me wrong, she clearly has gone through a lot of trauma and has a lot of things to work through, but I can't help but notice that her character development goes right out the fucking window when she isn't the main character, and her lack of empathy for her sister, especially in A Court of Silver Flames, is really, really, really fucked up. And she is also with a person who thinks it's okay to just not tell her very incredibly important information about her body. So a lot of this is leading me to believe that Feyre is just not as politically progressive as we want her to be. And that's another reason why I just think that when people read these books, they're not really thinking about the reasoning behind the characters' actions and what those actions indicate in their own relationships. Just saying, if you look at Feyre in the sense of classism, entitlement, and the fact that she is a terrible friend to most of her, especially female friendships, she's just not great. She's not great. And then if you also take into context the fact that the author had to use the death of a black woman to promote one of the books in this series, you just have to think about the fact that, like, maybe this series wasn't as progressive as you're thinking of it. Moving right along to an author who made some very strange political comments and has been rightfully told that her work is kind of like war propaganda. Let's talk about Violet Sorrengail. Violet is a little tricky because she's so very, very dumb. Very dumb. Even more dumb than the person that is an admitted dumbass on this list that's coming up. But this character, despite having been taught to be a scribe, doesn't seem to have a lick of common sense throughout the entirety of her storyline. As mentioned before, lives in a world that is war-torn and has to basically be inducted into this dragon riding school because they're at war with a country that rides griffins, because the griffin riders won't deal with their trade options. They're apparently a race of not good people because of that. I just feel like Violet might be the type of person who would have had to Google what a tariff is recently. You know what I'm saying? The thing about this series is that most of us that have wanted to read something about a dragon riding school amidst a embroiled militaristic society wanted a lot more from the world building, and there is just nothing to be had. Violet is very much this kind of stick figure revolutionary character, but I don't really feel like she even knows what she's fighting for or who she's fighting against, because I, as a reader of both of those books in that series, still don't know anything about the world building. I just still have so many questions, and when we get down to it, that's not the point of the series. Every single time I talk about Fourth Wing, especially on TikTok, people are like, you just turn your brain off and don't think about it. Except it's talking about war. There are like young people going off to war and dying, and the only reason that I think we get in the entire book is that these people didn't like the trade agreements we were giving them. That's not enough at all to put in a book about political warfare. And that's why, once again, when people say, oh, books aren't political, like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? War is very much a political agenda. Like, that's... It is clear to me that the romance is supposed to be the focal point of the Fourth Wing universe and storyline. That is what people read that series for. I just don't understand if Violet would have had time to even think about politics, because she spends so much of it just thirsting after Xaden's body. I do think Violet probably has the most potential out of all of these characters to be what people are saying that she is, but I just think the amount of information that the author gives us and how little you are supposed to think while reading this series, you just can't say that Violet is a progressive character, because albeit her representation of a disability is very good to see, and I like that, but that doesn't make her inherently progressive, especially when there's several accounts just in my comment section on my review of this book saying the things that she does while having this disability are impossible. And most of the time, it just feels like the disability is a way of making her feel more progressive, because we haven't seen that in a fantasy story. If she was supposed to be a revolutionary character and also disabled, I feel like there would just have had to have been more work put into her being a scribe and learning herself about what actually happened to the Griffin Riders and why this whole thing is happening in the first place. But that's not the focus of the story at all. To move on, the last character that we're going to talk about is one where the author is loudly making statements about the fact that she is not conservative. But I do find it interesting because this is the book that was under fire for right-wing conspiracies and anti-Jewish propaganda. So here's the thing. I do not know H.D. Carlton personally. I cannot make any assumptions regarding what she thought she was writing into her storyline. But she is very clearly stating her opinions regarding this election on Threads right now. But I do think that it's interesting to me that someone may have had an intention when writing a series, but when you weave very specific conspiracy theories about a violent man into your erotica, I just find it interesting that you're surprised that the people that like your book may also have been involved in something that happened on January 6th. This video isn't about H.D. Carlton at all, or what she thought she was doing. This is about Adeline, the main character of Haunting Adeline. And I would have to say that Adeline doesn't feel like a political character at all. I feel like she is so far removed from agency from the get-go that she probably wouldn't even know how to vote. That's not supposed to be a joke at anyone else's expense who may not have voted because they just didn't know how. But it's just to say that I feel like there is an uptick of people voting against their interests. And when you have an entire romance revolving around a person who takes away someone's agency over and over and over again, then the sequel is just unadulterated torture porn. I don't understand why you would expect the fan base of that series to not maybe understand where the progressive politics were supposed to be. Like, Addie is, once again, the self-admitted dumbass. She tokenizes people who are clearly queer in Seattle, and not only that, but says some pretty vile shit about Jewish people. And it leads me to believe that there is just a cognitive dissonance when it comes to how this character may have been taken by some people, because this character to me is not portrayed as someone who is progressive. Especially considering the fact that the book series is very disillusioned with the government as a whole. So here's the thing about this video. I have had an uptick over the course of the last few years on my channel, where if someone is telling a person about my channel, and then they show that person my channel, 9 times out of 10, that person goes, "Oh, I won't follow her. She doesn't like the books I like." Because of the fact that I talk negatively about mostly Sarah J. Maas, Haunting Adeline, etc. It's usually a man telling a woman about my channel. That has happened several times. My dad loves to recommend channels, my brother as well, and typically speaking, especially my brother, has had people go, "I won't follow her. She doesn't like the books I read." And that is mostly on the fact that these books are incredibly popular. People are reading these books at an insane rate, and they are not looking up rant reviews about them, even though a lot of them are in my comment section telling me I'm wrong. Don't get me wrong, I don't go search out rant reviews on my favorite books either, and I don't typically ascribe to like looking up 1-star reviews or delving super deeply initially into a book that I really enjoyed. But I do try to do my due diligence to read from marginalized voices, and I do try to do my due diligence when it comes to making sure that what I'm reading happens to be good representation of mental health, of relationships, of, once again, marginalizations, because I, as a reader, know that things are political and want to make sure that if I am supporting something on my platform, that I'm doing so in good faith. But I think that Marinez actually put it pretty succinctly after the election that a lot of people in this country may not be using their skill of reading to actually engage with any of the themes that are in these books at all. So even if these characters were incredibly progressive and did not have underlying conservative themes for all of them, I just feel like no one really even cares. That's not why people are reading these books. They're reading them as a stopgap in between their life and are not critically thinking about what they're imbibing. And as I've said very specifically about Haunting Adeline, I find that to be dangerous. To a lot of readers, Farah is just a pretty brunette who happens to have been drugged by the man she ends up marrying the first time that they interacted and has superpowers. To a lot of people, Violet Sorrengail is a dragon rider who rides a basic nuke into battle and has never questioned that concept at all. To a lot of readers, Adeline is a heroic figure in some way because of how she survives the assaults on her body numerous times, not only from villains in the story, but her actual love interest from the get-go. When I first wrote this script, I was just having a lot of trouble having sympathy for the people that idolize these characters because they are not well written, and there is a underlying theme throughout all of them of entitlement, and it comes down to the fact that especially people that look like me do not feel like they need to question how we got here, and do not think that we are entering into a time frame that could very well take us back 50 to 100 to 200 years politically, and it's very odd to me, especially for the people that are saying, oh, well, Sarah J. Maas wrote about how books are the like doorway to the world and knowledge is power and all that. Yeah, she did, because that's part of being a book girl, which I have a lot of thoughts on, like the whole book girl conventional thing, because as someone who's been on the internet a while and is known now as a book person, I find it very dehumanizing that my personality is being chalked up to someone who reads just smut, because that's not what I just read. And I have a lot of opinions on the themes in smut as well as not in smut. Not that there's anything wrong with smut, but I'm just saying there's a lot of interesting ways that we treat people that like these types of books, and we are giving especially the characters from these books a lot of credit for being progressive when, let's be real, they're actually not. And when it comes down to it, the people that voted against their best interest in this election had better be prepared for the fact that the incoming administration wants to ban your smut. So good luck with that. That's gonna be it for me. I'm gonna go now, guys. Like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Bye.